This is Akai Noel, a nuclear engineer for the Navy and a future veteran. College didn't really stick out to Noel, and life decided to take a different turn for him.
I decided that I didn't want to go through student debt and I wanted a fulfilling career, and something that resonated with me was nuclear power and green energy.
Although Noel found this the best decision for himself, it was not an easy transition for him to make.
I left and didn't sleep for the first 5 days into boot camp, so it was interesting because you're trying to stay awake, but your mind is obviously focused on other things.
Noel has spent the last year and a half on base in Charleston, where he recently graduated from training camp and is soon to be deployed.
I'm finishing up my training here in the last 3-4 months or so, and then they will assign me either to go to a aircraft carrier or a submarine stationed all over the U.S. or different parts of the world.
Noel is often away, but when he's back home, Noel enjoys spending time with his fiancée, hiking, traveling, and getting outside.
The challenges haven't been as focused on the actual Navy itself, but just dealing with being away from my lovely fiance and not being able to see the people that I love all the time, just being isolated a little bit.
With all the challenges and adversities Noel had to face, he never regretted any of it.
Absolutely. The Navy has offered me many opportunities that I wouldn't have found in college or a trade school or really anywhere else. I mean, I get paid to go to school, and I get paid really well to go to school, and really just think of it like a trade school and college mixed together where they teach you a specific job, but they're also paying you to do it. So it's a pretty sweet deal, and I would absolutely do it again if given the opportunity.
Calvin Moore, WBHS 9.
He would not have survived it if I had not sat with him for those 4 hours.
David Grandy, who goes by the nickname Butch, is a former member of the United States Army, and he worked as a special services officer, which included telling parents that their sons and daughters had died while at war.
It was not easy. You were going to deliver the worst news they'd ever heard in their life.
Grandy's experiences while he served affected him greatly, especially while telling families that their children had died.
Finally, he looked at me and he said, "Why was my son, who was a cook, in a foxhole with a rifle? He was supposed to be a cook." And when he said it, he started crying.
While Grandy's time at war greatly affected him, it taught him valuable lessons that he still uses 55 years after his service.
There were a ton of skills I learned in the military. The first off was management, leadership, responsibility, accountability. Those were the 4 big keys. The leadership and management did more for me throughout the course of my life than anything.
Today, Grandy spends his time playing pickleball, tending to his garden, and painting, but his time at war still affects him.
I had another case of a mother who just broke down sobbing, just right to the floor. And you had to get her up and get her in the house and deal with the family. So it was a long, tough day when you had to do that.
While Grandy will always have good and bad memories about his time at war, he would not hesitate to serve his country again.
All 3 of us will tell you that it was the best thing we ever did after college.
Aiden Odom, WBHS 9.
Actually, I hope you're getting this.
Oh, yeah.
If I had a bell, I'd ring it in the morning. I'd ring it.
From the ceremonial brass to the goodwill ambassadors, music and the military have always gone hand in hand. BHS chemistry teacher Dr. Roberto Morero Corleto is a highly decorated veteran and avid musician. We sat down with him and asked him to share his personal experiences with music and the military.
Through Army broadcasting outlets, we would listen to the music that was being played here in the States, and it was a way of connecting to home. Music was home.
The hippie movement of the 1960s brought songs protesting the Vietnam War and anti-military sentiment throughout the U.S.
Right now, if you travel about in uniform, people will thank you for your service. You would be shunned in the late 60s, and again, because you represented the establishment. You would not find many friends, and the music that you heard again was one of exclusions.
Despite the unwelcome return, Dr. Roberto Morero Corletto's music in the past.
We had a garage band, and I did more of that than actually working my books.
And his music in the present.
I asked her, can I take my guitar to school? He said, you're a university professor teaching chemistry. Why are you taking your guitar to school? I said, well, I like to play for my students.
Show how the forces of music and the military have shaped his life. Oscar Wilhelm, WBHS 9.
I was an 80s kid, raised on G.I. Joe and Rambo. So that time I was pretty much terrified. When you know you're going to a combat zone, it's a different kind of fear.
Steve Parks served as a corporal in the Army for 6 years, the first 4 years in Alaska and the last 2 in Iraq. He says that serving in the Army was a calling, but after a difficult freshman year in college, that dream became a reality.
I went to college at the University of Tennessee, Knoxville, and I had a rather unsuccessful freshman year. I think the only passing grade I made was the ROTC classes that I was in. I guess I took that as a sign and joined the Army for the first time in 1996.
Parks joined the Army and was assigned to the 501 Paratrooper Force. He later re-enlisted after the 9/11 attacks.
And when those attacks happened, there was a lot of public discussion around the situation being what was called an intelligence failure. The attack shouldn't have happened because we should have had appropriate intelligence to see it coming. So it just sounded to me like they needed some good people in the intelligence community. So I joined back up for a second time in, I guess it was 2002, 2003, and joined the Military Intelligence Corps.
Parks also describes what it was like serving in Iraq.
I remember one time where we were developing a friendship with a person we hoped could help us gather the types of information that we needed, and they invited us to a feast at their compound. So we graciously accepted and attended the feast in our honor. And I guess the most interesting thing about that experience was the main course was steamed goat head. So they brought out the head of a goat on a platter, which is not something we're accustomed to seeing, and definitely not accustomed to eating in the United States. And so that made for an interesting dinner conversation.
While life in Iraq had its challenges, so did his return back to civilian life.
So obviously you miss out on a college education, which I had to catch up on much later in life. And then really you miss out on just average, ordinary experiences that most college kids have and most post-college kids have. You're in a completely different environment in the military with a completely different set of experiences. Those experiences inside that controlled environment of the military are going to shape you for the rest of your life. A lot of times you feel different than everybody else because of the experiences you've had.
Even after spending 6 years in service to his country, Parks says that he would do it all again.
Very proud of what I did, and what I did has benefited me throughout my life. But there are some things that I could have done or would have liked to have done that I didn't get to do. So I think just thinking a little more long-term and having a long-term plan defined, setting some goals and making decisions that align with those goals.
While it was hard serving in an active combat zone, there were still lifelong lessons and friendships forged, the principles that set the foundation for the amazing father, husband, and veteran that Steve Parks is today. Alana Ehrlich, WBHS 9.
Tammy Mallory Grindstaff is a former sergeant in the United States Army. She served 23 years and talks about some of her most memorable experiences that stuck with her.
My most memorable experience was in 1992. My first duty assignment was in Korea, and I got to fly over in a helicopter over the DMZ. So that is the line between the demilitarized zone between North and South Korea. So that was extremely exciting, and I was only 19, 20 years old. So it was amazing.
And this is what she had to say about how the Army helped her with challenges throughout her life.
It's built my confidence. It taught me a lot of discipline. I went in, like I said, at 19. I was in for 23 years, and so I moved up within the ranks. So, of course, I was a private and had to do everything I was told by everybody, or there were repercussions. And then I ended up retiring at a higher rank where I had privates that worked for me. And it just gave me a lot of confidence and taught me that I can do anything with hard work and discipline. So I needed it.
In return for this hard work, she received a letter signed by President Bush for her dedication to serving our nation.
I worked really hard to be the top, not only female, but the top soldier in my company for physical fitness. So I have always been a runner, and so I tried to be like the first male or female first soldier in when we would do our physical fitness test and things like that. So I became a master fitness instructor.
She says if she could spread one message to people about serving the Army, it would be this.
It means so much when people see soldiers in the airport in uniform, and regardless of, like, even when I'm in civilian clothes, it means so much to them to go up and tell them to thank them for their service. These are people, it's 2% of the United States population, less than 2% that joins the military. They're away from their families.
Clay Isaacs, WBHS 9.
I was able to learn a lot of different things, meet a lot of people.
Bill Mayberry likes to golf, watch sports, and do Bible studies, but a quick pass by his home will reveal that he is very patriotic.
I served mostly in the state of Tennessee. I served in supply, personnel, finance, safety, in all different phases, and I was an auditor for a while, so I got a lot of experience.
During part of his time, he worked in the counter-drug division, where he would inspect other members of the Army.
We would have to set up it was a surprise visit, and you walk into a unit, it was their drill time, a weekend drill. And we'd get there, and they would when they got into formation, we would walk in and close it down, so they couldn't escape.
In addition to the numerous awards he received, he was moved up to the rank of CW5 during his service.
And I was promoted in '76, I guess it was. I guess I was the third one in the state to make CW5. Like I say, I was at the right place at the right time. Yeah.
Mayberry has shown huge dedication to his state and country, and his 39-year-long service has had an impact on many lives. Emma Claire Moore, WBHS 9.
I was so glad to be out. I counted down the days.
John Brown, my grandfather, served in the Army for 4 years.
I was from a little small town that I was born and raised in, and it gave me an opportunity to travel.
Brown is retired and enjoys fishing with his friends and family during his free time.
The only way we could communicate is letters, cassette tapes. We got one phone call home a month. We could stay on the line for 15 or 20 minutes, and that was it. I was a legal clerk, so I was basically a paralegal. I did wills and powers of attorney, worked in a law office. So it was all, that was really professional. And by the time I got out, I had almost 2 years of college completed.
Bella Blank, WBHS 9.
That's a good question.
Travis Dunlap is a military veteran and a nurse practitioner from Brentwood, Tennessee. He grew up fairly poor in a military family. He says he joined the military because his entire family had enlisted.
I went there, but I did have a sense of patriotism, just because of my dad, the stories he told, the pride that he showed, being in the military, so that influenced me a lot too, as far as, feel like doing the right thing.
Okay. In the Navy, he was in a submarine underwater for 2 months during the Cold War, following Soviet Union submarines. At one point, he remembers being right on the tail of an enemy sub.
Yeah, we had when we were under the in the Arctic Ocean, we were following a little too closely to one, and but I mean there was no incident or anything like that. And it's relative. I mean, we were still a good distance away, but we got closer than our captain would have wanted us to.
After he returned home, he went to college and started a profession in medical services. The transition was easy because he had already had the basic knowledge he needed to succeed.
After I was very successful in the Navy, I was like, I can do anything I want to. So, and that was one of those things, was going to college. So that was a very big influence on just building.
Travis now has a family with his 2 sons in college. As he reminisces every day, he says he wouldn't be the same dad he is today without the military experience.
Stay in touch with a lot of the guys I was on the submarine with, 30 years later. So, they were our lifelong friends.
JB Spillane, WBHS 9.
Here is my grandfather David Rice, who served in the U.S. Army in the early 1960s. Let's hear what he has to say about his experience in the Army. What led you to joining the Army?
When I was in high school in 1960, I was a senior in high school, and they had to draft then. All 18-year-olds had to sign up for the draft, and a good percentage were drafted. So the National Guard came by and tried to recruit a bunch of us. A couple of my friends signed up, so it looked like a good idea to me. Since I was only 17, my parents, your great-grandparents, had to sign so I could do it, but I did.
What role did you do during your time in the U.S. Army?
And I got the job of the fire direction. I told them what to set the guns on, where to shoot them, how much, the whole shooting match, which was a lot better than being close to them because they were very, very noisy.
What did you do after working with the artillery cannons in the U.S. Army?
In 1966, I was through with meetings. I had 2 years in active service after that.
Caleb Boylan, WBHS 9.